But in this part of the Palisades, while the fire has moved on, that means the memories are starting to pour in as people come home, and they come home to what you see behind me. Really, all that's left is memories. The owner of the house in front of us where we're standing told us about 60 years of family history right here, a 4th of July parade that used to go back and go by every single year, the orange trees by the door that his father loved so much. And you got to think that behind every burned down entryway, there is another story like that and another all the way up and down these blocks. This is one of more than 5,000 homes and businesses damaged just in the Palisades alone. And the fire, as you mentioned, it's still burning, still just 6% contained, according to fire officials. But some 8,000 firefighters are now on the job, on the ground and in the air, working to contain the flames. And President Biden says there's more help on the way, 400 additional firefighters en route, plus a promise from the federal government that they will cover the bill for all of these firefighting costs here for at least the next 6 months. Now, this is much later into the winter than is typical for fires here, but they do keep coming. And here we get to the good news. Firefighters are notching some victories. Overnight, they stopped much of that Kenneth fire you mentioned, the newest one to the northwest of here. And those evacuation orders in that area, they've actually been lifted. Good news indeed. But we go from heroes to potential villains. In Ventura County, officials say an arsonist may indeed be behind the blaze there. And in Los Angeles County, where we are, the fight against looters has stepped up. At least 20 people arrested so far, according to the sheriff. And there are growing questions this morning about whether all of this pain and this heartache, this devastation could have been.
Once again, I think it's irresponsible for the media to immediately hit that line because for two reasons. One, these people are being arrested under suspicion, okay? And as far as I understand, they've already said that there wasn't enough evidence to suggest that this person that they apprehended was actually an arsonist. So that is, like, in my opinion, that's majorly irresponsible, especially in a moment where, like, you're supposed to exercise critical analysis. You're supposed to exercise critical thinking. You're not supposed to immediately lean onto these panic narratives. But of course, it doesn't matter because people hear this and go, oh my God, that's why it's actually awesome that the LAPD is operational budget's like, what, $2 billion a year? They deserve it because they're doing, you know, this brilliant, brave work. That's it. You need to understand, arrests do not mean convictions. Arrests do not mean that people were looting and they got arrested while in the process of looting. That just means suspicion. Okay? We don't know. Maybe all 20 of them were looting, by the way. I'm not saying that they weren't. But understand why this narrative thrives. Okay? Understand why this narrative thrives.
Been prevented. Jonathan Vigliotti, as you know, has been covering the Palisades fire since it started on Tuesday, and he brought some of those pressing questions to the mayor here, Karen Bass. Jonathan, good morning.
And good morning to you, Tony. Critics say the mayor should have led by example and never should have left the country. She left for Africa on Saturday after those dire wind warnings were already issued. She returned back on Wednesday to scenes like this. Nearly 20,000 acres destroyed here in the Palisades, more than 5,000 structures like this condo leveled.
Chilling aerial images from the Pacific Palisades speak of devastating loss. Since Tuesday, at least 70,000 people have been ordered to evacuate, including Malibu resident Alec Gellis, who took this dramatic video of his narrow escape.
It was like a vortex of embers. There was no oxygen. I couldn't breathe. I barely even made it to my car.
It's a wind gust that got up to over 90 miles an hour. I have not seen that in my 25-year career.
And now questions are mounting over the city's response and whether it was prepared as the fire broke out.
For several hours, we watched hundreds of homes in a neighborhood burned to the ground. We did not see a single fire engine. My question to you is, what explains this lack of preparation and rapid response?
When we are safe, when lives have been saved and homes have been saved. We will absolutely do an evaluation, but my focus right now is on the lives and on the homes.
Do you think your leadership was effective while responding to this disaster?
I just said what I believe is the most important thing for us to do right now, and that is going to continue to be my focus. Thank you.
LA Mayor Karen Bass is also facing criticism over the $17.6
The LAPD do vital work in stopping looting gangs. Look up LAPD gangs to find out more. No, it's LASD gangs, Los Angeles Sheriff's Department, that has the gangs. Yes, I will be talking about the Lake and Riley Act. Arrests do not mean convictions, I know. And I'm going to be talking about that as well. As America becomes more and more reactionary, it's getting completely out of hand.
million reduction in the LA Fire Department's budget for 2025. Last month, LA Fire Chief Kristen Crowley warned that the cuts affect the ability to respond to large-scale emergencies such as wildfires.
I had to make some tough decisions because of those budget cuts, and with that, we focused directly back on our core mission as a fire department.
I think one of the important things that she also routinely mentions in the news right now is that everyone keeps talking about the $17 million. That number is marginal in comparison to the broader budgets, okay? But it's important to understand, because if they're getting $800 million total, that means they probably need $900 million total. As a matter of fact, I know that that's what their demand was originally, okay? And the fact that they're actually cutting the budget for the LAFD while simultaneously increasing the budget for the discretionary spending of the LAPD implies that while there is money in the bank, the places that they're using that money on or their priorities, their spending priorities are obviously in the direction of more policing. Okay? That is what is important to understand and address here. That's it. They are not spending the money on the fire department to ensure that the fire department can hire more people, to ensure that the fire department can continue to pay pensions out, to continue paying for all of the non-emergency workers that work within the LAFD structure. Okay, this is not hindsight. It's not hindsight as 2020. Okay, it's not. This is foresight. You want to know why it's foresight? Because you think the Los Angeles Fire Department did not actually make a big stink about their budget being cut? They did. Of course they did. And now she's in this unique predicament where, like, she has to play ball with with Karen Bass, while also simultaneously everyone is using this as an opportunity to shit on Karen Bass for understandable reasons, but also simultaneously, the other aspect of this story, is that even if they had $100 million extra dollars, like, this is unprecedented wind speeds, okay? So she does make the point about how unprecedented these wind speeds are and how dry the vegetation is. And therefore, who knows how much of the fire that they could have prevented from spreading. Even if they had $100 million extra dollars, I'm sure, like, I don't know what that calculation is. I don't know if, like in Pasadena, for example, would they have been able to stop the spread of the fire and only have 50% of the houses getting burned down? Like, would they have been able to prevent an additional 25% of houses? Probably, but I don't know. Unprecedented is only an excuse in a pre-climate change world. I mean, it still is unprecedented. It's not precedented if it's unprecedented. Okay. The CWPP Community Wildfire Protection Plan in place for LA County is public info and has a map of highly at-risk areas that should have been mitigated to prevent exactly what's happening. It is unprecedented, not unexpected. Exactly. It was expected. And for the record, I think it was The Intercept that did some reporting on this as well. But like at the time, Karen Bass's office looked at these warnings that were given. At its meeting of December 17th, Board of Fire Commissioners approved the report to be transmitted to the mayor and city council. The Los Angeles Fire Department is facing unprecedented operational challenges due to the elimination of critical civilian positions and $7 million reduction in overtime variable staffing hours. These budgetary reductions have adversely affected the department's ability to maintain core operations such as technology and communication infrastructure, payroll processing, training, fire prevention, and community education. In addition to these impacts, the reduction in variable hours has severely limited the department's capacity to prepare for, train, and to respond to large-scale emergencies. At the time, they turned around and said that this was hysterical. Okay? At the time, the Karen Bass's own spokesperson was asked about these fears that the Los Angeles Fire Department was presenting. I typically disagree with your points, but I agree with this one. It's such a crazy disaster to make it political as wild. It's like situations with hurricanes in Florida and people blaming DeSantis. She was also pressed to make cuts, I'm sure, from both sides, so she did just that. No. She was pressed by the wealthy. But more importantly than that, she was pressed to not just make cuts on certain areas, but to increase funding on policing. Okay, there was a tremendous number of people who are right now complaining about the LAFD budgets being cut that were the number one advocates for the LAPD to get more funding. Okay. No one was pressing her to cut the Los Angeles Fire Department budgets. They were pressing her to increase police budgets. So, of course, she did just that. And she did that by moving existing money around. Chad, he read it and doesn't want to cover it. It's fine. Stop tagging me. No, I saw Emma's point. It doesn't matter. When, and police departments do this as well. Okay. People say like, oh, defunding. They defunded the police. And half the time when they're talking about defunding the police, they're actually talking about like the police getting, instead of $100 million extra dollars that year, getting $99 million extra dollars. Okay. And then they consider that to be defunding. There is truth for that for the fire department as well. Okay. I would say that it's more truthful for the Los Angeles Fire Department rather than the police department, because the police, they get expansive budgets, virtually unlimited budgets. Okay. When you cut, when the LAFD is like demanding $900 million for better fire prevention methods, all this stuff, okay, and they're only getting 800, and then on top of that, their discretionary spending is being cut by like 17 million. That shows where the local government's priorities are, where their spending priorities are. Okay, that's it. And it is not hindsight, it is foresight when these institutions, these agencies openly say, hey, you're cutting our funds. This is going to be a major problem. Okay. And then people turn around and go, oh, it's because Karen Bass is gay or the LA Fire Department chief is gay. So that's the reason why this happened. And it's like, it's so unimaginably stupid. It's so unimaginably frustrating hearing these dipshits miles and miles away talking about how it's because the LAFD fire department chief is a lesbian woman that like these fires got out of control. Like, you are such a scumbag. Yeah, I joked about this. I said firefighters in LA are working tirelessly for the past week to contain these incredible wildfires, and the weirdos on this site have been discussing how gay they are. Some of you need to be left behind. Like, the fact, yeah, I'm in a burning building. Someone pulls me out of the burning building. Immediately I go, what's your cranial circumference, please? Are you a white man? If not, put me back in the fire, please. Are you, if you're a white man, are you a gay white man? If not, if you are a gay white man, put me back in the fire. I'll die. Psychotic.
Department and EMS provider.
Mayor Bass defended the cuts.
That we were in tough budgetary times. Everybody knew that. But that
Yeah, that's why we only gave the police $138 million, by the way. Tough budgetary times.
that the impact of our budget really did not impact what we've been going through over the last few days.
And the wind event that fueled this disaster, incredibly rare. It happens about once every 3.
This headline was the LAFD. Yeah, I saw this. Everyone is doing no, it actually increased. They never actually say this about the police budget, okay? I already covered this. I already mentioned it. If the budgetary demands are $900 million and they only give you $800 million, okay, while cutting discretionary spending elsewhere, while simultaneously increasing discretionary spending for the police, then yes, they functionally are underfunded, okay? Functionally, they are underfunded. It is ridiculous that people are literally saying this when they never, ever in a million years would say this about the police, okay? It's so frustrating that everyone wants to be like the smarty pants. Like, I addressed this from day one. I talked about this in that TikTok, in that dumbass TikTok where I talked about how I played basketball outside. I was like, shouts out to Karen Bass for cutting the fire department $17 million while increasing the police department's funds by $130 million in the same process. Although this is a tiny, minuscule percentage of the overarching budget for the Los Angeles Fire Department, it still shows where the spending priorities are. Okay? I think it is, I think it's important to recognize that. It's important to recognize that, especially when here, this is a good example. People defending Karen Bass, City Council, LAFD requested 301 new positions in last year's budget. Instead, Karen countered with a proposal to slash 71. Don't fall for propaganda. If we do not hold politicians accountable for their massive failures, the next crisis will be worse. And by the way, they did this because 100% because they saw that there was direct need in their minds for more police officers. That's it. They constantly talked about, and still to this day talk about, a need for additional cops. Okay? Understand that.
Spoke today with
this was once again, this is like the LA fire chief is like in a unique predicament here where she obviously doesn't want to boulder Karen Bass too much because they have to collaborate in times of need.
With Los Angeles Fire Chief Kristen Crowley, who's in charge of the department's more than 3,200 uniformed personnel. We began by asking her how they're doing.
They're resilient. They're putting everything into this. I can guarantee you that. I'm extremely proud of their dedication and commitment to this mission. They're doing everything in their power to save lives and protect property.
I must ask you, because a lot of people are talking about the warning that you sent last month that the budget cuts have, quote, severely limited the department's capacity to prepare for, train for, and respond to large-scale emergencies, including wildfires. You sent that warning about these budget cuts. Was this preventable?
I tell you, from the budget cut side of things, when there's a $17 million cut in our budget, operating costs, immediately from that point, I had to make some tough decisions. I looked at some other duties and responsibilities that we do as a fire department and had to focus right back on the training of our firefighters and also our ability to respond to the everyday fires and EMS.
It's also a unique position because, again, because the fires are so expansive and everywhere at the same time, unless you have, firefighters, like every single citizen is also a trained firefighter, it's going to be quite difficult to combat all these fires. Like there's always going to be larger problems that they cannot tackle. Okay? So understand, do you like this person or is she another government crony? Dude, she's the freaking fire chief, man. She's the Los Angeles Fire Department's fire chief. What do you mean government crony? Like, as far as government cronies goes, like these are the people that you're supposed to defend unconditionally and vociferously, okay? Who can you defend if not the fire department? What are we doing? Like, I get being skeptical of all public servants or the government or whatever, but Jesus Christ, dude.
Mass response.
Would that $17 million that had been cut from your budget have made a difference in this fight?
I would say with the lean forward posture that we took, knowing that a $17 million cut, we had to take from somewhere, and that was from the non-essential duties and responsibilities that as the fire department we have taken on over the past many, many years.
But with all due respect, in December you had warned that the budget cuts would severely limit your ability to respond to large-scale emergencies. Is that true or not?
Yes, so I would say yes, we were limited to a certain factor, yes.
And let me ask you about how that limited your response, because in the early hours of the wildfires, especially in the Pacific Palisades, we had a team on the ground, a crew there with a reporter, and witnessed a number of homes burned to the ground, and there was not a fire truck in sight. How did that happen?
We pre-deployed the most amount of emergency resources that we could with what we had. With the pre-deployment, when the fire takes off, we're going to push as many resources that we can at that particular incident. And that's what we did. We did exactly what we could with what we had.
So you're saying you didn't have enough resources?
I would say in a win event like this that we are living today in day 3, something that is as...
You said that the fire department cuts were minimal. It's minimal in comparison to the ginormous budget spent. Yes, if the overall budget is like around 800 million, then yes, a 17 million cut is going to be minimal in comparison, okay? But it doesn't matter because they need 100 extra million on top of that. And if it's going in the opposite direction of their need, that means that they're underfunded. That's it. That's the point. But having said that, there is no, like, obviously more firefighters that are better equipped, more training, more preventative measures, especially with like communicating with the public in dangerous areas that are at risk for wildfires. You need to have a constant upkeep to ensure that there is like dry brush that's cleared out and things of that nature, right? Like all of that stuff, even if you did everything right, even if they got $100 extra million, there is no 100% certainty that they would have stopped all of the fires. You understand what I'm saying? Like there's always going to be a limit to how much prevention and how much combating of the existing fires that they, how many resources you could throw at a problem when the problem becomes too large. Okay? Blame the gardeners, eh? That's not what I'm saying. Use James Wood tears to negate fire. Like her point here is that regardless of the underfunding, it's 100-mile winds. A 100-mile wind will carry embers to unpredictable places. That's precisely the reason why the Palisades fire basically erupted out of nowhere and carried it all the way to the coastline in a matter of like 2 hours. That's insane. It was basically a fire hurricane. You understand?
as significant as this particular fire, I would say we threw exactly what we could with what we had. So if I had 1,000 engines to throw at this fire, I honestly don't think 1,000 engines at that very moment could have tapped this fire down.
Yeah.
Chief Crowley, thank you so much for your time.
I don't know why they cut her answers, but yeah, she's basically saying that. That's her final conclusion, is that like it's a fire tornado. So even if we had 1,000 additional engines, like we don't know if we could be able to stop this. Even if they have unlimited water, okay, they don't know if they could be able to. They don't know if they could stop it. Like one of the things that a lot of people are talking about are the fire hydrants, okay, and due to pressures and due to electronic pump mechanisms being out of commission because they cut electricity to certain areas in order to mitigate, in order to do some additional, in order to take extra precautions to ensure that more power lines don't go down and expand the area of fire. Okay, there was issues with the electric pumps that actually are supposed to push water into other fire hydrants. The problem, however, is that fire hydrants are there for structural fires. Okay, fire hydrants are there for structural fires. So if you have a large area, or if you have like sporadic structural fires occurring in certain areas, certain neighborhoods, that's what the fire hydrants are for. Fire hydrants are not there to stop a wildfire that has engulfed the entire city, that is in an area that is erupting in fire in a fire tornado. You can't fire hydrant your way out of that problem either. So that's precisely the reason why a lot of the professionals kept saying, you can't combat this kind of fire with fire hydrants. Okay? That's why they were dumping salt water on the problem, even though salting the earth is obviously devastating devastating in terms of using that land in the future, making the land potentially even more hostile to the elements, making, creating even more dry brush potentially down the line that will make it even worse because you're basically killing the land. Yeah, making it more arid, creating more erosion. That's the reason why that's a last-ditch effort at that point. It's also bad for the planes unless they're built for it. No, those are planes that are built for it. So, like, obviously, it's a last-ditch effort that they are. Why are you trying to justify the current mayor? Wait, what? Big question for me is why the Democrats don't care about LA. Why Ember started at first place given 50 degrees. Great question. Why did the Ember start? I'm not justifying the current mayor at all. I've already criticized the mayor and continue to do so. I think it's difficult for you to understand that I'm just explaining to you how complex the situation is, and a black and white solution to this kind of issue is always going to be endlessly reductive and also will cause you to hyper focus on random things or greatly overemphasize certain aspects of the problem while refusing to recognize other contributing factors.
Time, and we're thinking of you and all the firefighters.
I want to make sure the community knows our firefighters are absolutely doing everything that we can, and I am certainly proud of how hard and dedicated they are working to save lives and property.
Well said. Thank you, Chief.
Why are you trying to spread the insane conspiracy theory that fires will burn even when it's cold outside? Seems very sus. Yeah, I know. Using salt water, using planes at night is a clear indication of the gravity of the situation. It's incredibly dangerous to fly over a fire at night, especially when the wind conditions are so crazy. In many countries in the EU, no matter how bad the fire is, the planes are grounded at sunset. Yeah, it is an act of desperation when you're dumping salt water onto the fire. Understand that the situation has gotten completely out of control. That's my point. Yeah, the misconception here is that fire department funding would have stopped this. This is land management, fuel issue. Even another 100 million probably wouldn't change anything. No, fire department funding also plays a role in land management, though. Like for example, I'll tell you this much. I briefly covered this earlier, but it bears repeating. Okay, the fire department, for example, could communicate with neighborhoods like the Pacific Palisades on what the best practices are in terms of like harm mitigation, in terms of like the likelihood that this is a potential area of impact. They can go in ahead of time and make sure that you know, certain types of trees, for example, are not so close to the houses, or clearing, making sure that there's like rigorous fire prevention, fuel prevention, in terms of like clearing out the dry brush out of your houses, things of that nature. It's just like there are funding would help in that regard as well. So there are, I mean, this is a very complex situation where more funding does absolutely help, not just in prevention, but also in mitigation. Okay. But it's not necessarily, but at the end of the day, if there are 100-mile winds that are carrying embers all over the place, then yeah, you're going to run into a problem regardless. You're going to run into these issues regardless. But funding always helps. That's the point. A resident who lives right by Eaton Canyon captured the moment the Eaton fire sparked right into the transmission tower on the east side of the canyon. We don't know yet. We do not know if this is the responsible party. I don't think that there's any reason to just like speculate at this point. They will obviously conduct rigorous examination, rigorous investigations to figure out exactly what the source of the fire was initially. I work logistics in a major metro area fire department in Texas, and due to lack of working well with others, I can guarantee that all the money in the world couldn't have made this event better. Cooperation and mutual aid is one of the things that separately funded public organizations just don't jive well. My point is, when you have above ground wires with really old infrastructure, historically in the state of California, the highest likelihood is probably 100-mile winds pushing the above ground lines directly into the brush that is already directly into the vegetation that is overgrown. And most likely, that is the most likely contributor to this, to the spark initially. That's usually what it is. Okay. I seen a brush-looking Christmas tree on fire on January 2nd, the night of 10. I'm a truck driver, and it was on the opposite side, or else I would have stopped to use my fire extinguisher, but I did call on 911. It was just a very odd place since it was almost 11 p.m. Yeah, here, this is a great example of this, obviously. California's deadliest wildfire in history started when an uninspected 100-year-old metal hook holding up a high-voltage line wore out, dropped the cable, which sparked against the steel tower holding it up. 85 people died. Okay? I'm not saying that this was yet another instance of this exact same thing happening, but make no mistake, this is usually a major contributor. I read an article recently which claimed that most of America's power infrastructure is big wires carrying lots of current stretched across growing forests, and inspecting them costs money, and that is not being spent. So in addition to the climate, that's why I'd expect to see more of this. So just remember that. Okay? I'm not saying that this is the responsible factor here. We don't know yet. But understand that in the past, that was the contributing factor. That was the inception point. So, you know, it's something to consider. We'll get to the arson stuff in a second.
3 to 5 years. We have had 3 of them in the last 3 months. The good news, the wind is starting to calm down, aerial attacks taking place, but now there's a new threat. The FAA saying a super scooper was grounded after it hit a drone. The wing was damaged. The FBI is now assisting using what they're calling aerial armor to stop drones from taking off, Tony.
Another day, another problem with drones. Jonathan, thank you very much.
Vice President and I have